This is a Quiet Loud Studios production, the podcast network where reflection meets amplification.
Hello, Athlete Mindset community. This is Lisa Bontasumi, the host of Athlete Mindset. Before we dive into this episode, I want to invite you to support the mission and purpose of our show. For $10 a month, you can help to make sure these conversations get to as many athletes, teams, coaches, and sport mental health environments as possible. As a subscriber, you will receive exclusive content and updates on current topics in athlete mental health, and you'll be directly contributing to the betterment of mental health for all athletes. Join the cause. Subscribe at sportsE.io/athlete and make a difference today. Again, that's sportsE.io/athlete. With your support and amplification, we can ensure more voices are heard and more individuals and communities are positively impacted. What's up, Athlete Mindset community? We're so excited to be sending you another episode. Check it out. This is actually the second episode with Dr. Kensa Gunter. I did a first one back in February of 2022, believe it or not. You can't see her, but she's looking at me like, what? We did it. When was it? This was back in February of 2022, and we're going for round 2 here. So, I'm super excited. Let's start with giving this queen her proper introduction. Dr. Kensa Gunter is a licensed psychologist and a certified mental performance consultant. She works at the intersection of mental health, high performance, well-being, and culture. And through her private practice, provides counseling, consultation services to individuals, teams, and organizations. Dr. Gunter also serves as the director of NBA and WNBA Mind Health, the league's mental health, wellness, and performance program. Additionally, Dr. Gunter serves on the board of directors for Little League International and the advisory board of the Applied Sport and Performance Psychology program at Dominican University of California. She previously served as president of the Association for Applied Sport Psychology during the 2021 term and is currently the president-elect for Division 47 of APA, the Society for Sport, Exercise, and Performance Psychology. Welcome, Kensa.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's so good to be here with you, and I appreciate the introduction. As you were saying, February 2022, in my mind, I was like, that feels so long ago, and yet also like yesterday. Time is such a weird thing now, but regardless of the time that it's been, it's a pleasure and honor to be here with you today. So thank you for that.
I appreciate you. You are a very busy and high demand individual. So I appreciate you taking the time and energy to be with me for this second go round. Lots has changed in your life since then. Tell me, and everyone first, please go back and listen to that episode as well. We talk a lot about February being Black Heritage Month. We talk about her personal connection to sports, all that stuff. But today I want to ask you, tell me, what is the NBA WNBA Mind Health program?
Well, so Mind Health is the league's mental health, wellness, and performance program. And as you said in the name, it's NBA WNBA. But the truth of the matter is that we service all of our player leagues, which includes our NBA G League. And we also offer support or have offered support to our 2K League, which is our eSport League, and Basketball Africa. There are ways in which we try to provide information about mental performance and mental health there as well. But the heart of the matter is Mind Health is a program that's designed to both ensure that there are resources available at the team level for players and often for coaches and staff to address the mental aspect of their health and well-being, whether they are trying to restore their health, maintain their health, or enhance it in the same way that we think about physical health. We want to make sure that teams have resources available in order to be able to support players, staff, coaches in their efforts to prioritize their mental health and well-being. And our vision is to humanize the conversation about mental health and to position it as an essential element of excellence, wellness, and performance, both on and off the court. So we really, as a program, are trying to change the culture as it relates to thinking about mental health and mental performance. We're trying to provide education. We certainly provide service. And what we really want to do, again, is just be a present resource and support for this aspect of one's overall health and well-being.
Awesome. It sounds incredible. Let's get to the real of it a little bit. What's been a really proud moment for you as the director of this program, and what's been a challenging moment and how you addressed it? Because as excellent as it sounds, right? Not everyone's going to be ready to take that bite or like take that dive for lots of different reasons. But yeah, if you could share those two points with us, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to your point, like it's a program and we're still growing, right? The program has been in existence since 2018. So it hasn't been incredibly long, but in the time that we have existed over the last 6 years, I guess, for the program, I've been in this role since January 2020. I would say a huge point of pride for me is in the network, that the Mind Health Network, the network of professionals, that make up our Mind Health community. A few weeks ago, we had our annual Mind Health Summit in which about 50 providers across the NBA, the WNBA, and the G League came together for 3 days of community building, just hanging out, but also professional development to talk about what it is to work at the intersection of mental health and sport, what it is to integrate mental performance, what it is to educate those within the world of sport, the other stakeholders, coaches, health and performance staff, front office staff, owners, about why it's important to think about mental health and to think about mental health not just rooted in illness, but to think about mental health for the pure standpoint of fostering health, right? And so the point of pride is in the network. When we had this meeting, this in-person meeting, the last time we had this in-person meeting was in 2019. And at that point, we only had an NBA network. There was no W network. There was no G League network. So we have grown to the point where all of our NBA, WNBA, and G League teams have a designated mental health provider and a psychiatrist that work with their teams, that are on staff to work with their teams, whether they're contracted. Some of them have full-time staff, but we have expanded the reach of services in the network that exists, the professionals who are working with our teams. And the professionals include, again, I want to double down on this, licensed mental health providers, mental performance consultants, and psychiatrists. We have all three within our network. So that really is a point of pride that we've managed to create a program that exists beyond policies and procedures and translates to personnel actually being in the team markets and serving our teams. So that's really great. In terms of your other question, what's a challenge, right? Because yes, even in our efforts to continue to destigmatize these conversations, and I say beyond destigmatizing, we're also trying to normalize. So we're not just trying to remove the negative stigma, but we're also trying to create a norm that includes attending to the mental landscape and the mental fitness of folks. One of the ongoing opportunities is continued integration, continuing to find ways to truly integrate our professionals into teams and into the organizational activities. There's still a lot of education and a lot of literacy that I think is needed just to help people continue to move beyond the stigma, right? In the same way that we have athletes who will now get on the athletic training table and get their ankles taped as a preventative measure, right? We're still working to get people to think about mental health and mental performance in the same way. So it is a challenge, but I see it more as an opportunity to continue to educate folks about how you can think about mental health and mental performance and it not be rooted in distress, illness, challenge, trouble, like deficit, right? So that continues to be our opportunity, is to create a different starting point for how we think about health and performance as it relates to the mental side of the game and the mental side of life. But I think we are making some headway there. And I think there generationally, people have different ideas and thoughts about what this is, what it isn't, what it should be, how it should be integrated or not. So, we just have to be creative and intentional and keep our eye on the North Star of providing support and resources that we know are needed and we know need to be in our team spaces.
I appreciate it. I love everything you said. A couple questions have come from your responses that I'm wondering people might have. So I'm going to speak to a little bit.
Sure.
I love that you're proud of the network and how vast that extends now. You said that you have a network of licensed mental health clinicians, EMPCs or certified mental performance consultants, and psychiatrists. How do they differ? And what role do they play that's unique to the other two roles, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you an analogy that I often use when describing this. So if we think about the physical health side, you have your team doctors, right? You have athletic trainers and physical therapists, and you also have strength and conditioning coaches, right? And they all work in the realm of physical health and maintenance and prevention and wellness, but they all have unique training. They have unique areas of expertise and focus, but they work together to create a system of support when it comes to taking care of the athletes, right?
Yes.
You can think of it in a very similar way with the different types of professionals that are within our Mind Health Network. So we have our psychiatrists who are experts when it comes to brain body functioning, brain body wellness, just brain body interaction. Their training equips them to have that kind of knowledge in a way that is unique for them and for their profession, right? And so we have psychiatrists who can provide that kind of education, but who also have the capacity to prescribe medication. And they also have that knowledge of behavioral health because of their focus in psychiatry. And so we can think of them as similar to the team docs, right? Like they have that advanced training in brain body, medication. If we have more severe cases, they can certainly be of assistance there. But even as we, again, think about maintenance and health, they can provide a certain level of education around the mind body, brain body connection that's unique for them. If we think about our licensed mental health providers, of course, there's more than one type. You have your psychologists, your LMFTs, your LPCs, your social workers, right? So there's different kinds. But we think about our licensed mental health providers in the same way that we think about our athletic trainers and our physical therapists. Certainly, they are there should something happen. They can help to address injury. They can help people to restore functioning. But more often than not, they're there for maintenance, right? They're there to help provide skills, to help develop skills, to help people think through and process things from a mental health standpoint. This is what we do. So in that licensed mental health space, we can provide education, we can help with development, we can help with restoration as needed, right? But there's a range of things that we can do to offer support in that realm. And then if I think about our strength and conditioning coaches, we think about them on the physical health side as increasing endurance, flexibility, strength, all of those things that are necessary to be physically ready. I think about the same thing for mental performance consultants. We're trying to increase strength, flexibility, endurance as it relates to the mental side of your game, your focus, your ability to persist, your ability to bounce back, how you talk to yourself, how you show up, right? So those individuals are teaching those mental skills to help increase the mental fitness and fortitude needed to endure the demands of the season. So a long explanation, but that's really how I think about them coming together. They all have their individual, and that's what they do individually. And then collectively, they're all trying to support the health, wellness, and performance of the individual, which translates to the health, wellness, and performance of the team.
Yes. No, I love the thoroughness, the time, because people ask me all the time, what's the difference? And so you've just very eloquently laid it out and already touched on sort of my next question about how, not even a question, but a comment on how we relate physical health plus mental health equals health. And like the roles that everybody plays and the collaboration that happens and the communication on behalf of the individual athlete and the team is super cool. You know, I think that, like you said, generationally, that's really interesting. I find that also in how one is able to lean in and receive some of this information. But I think the way that we can relate it to the physical side is very palpable and like is accessible and like relatable. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think that's so important, right?
It's very important. I mean, I recently did a presentation at the APA's convention, American Psychological Association's annual convention in August last month. And my talk was when the physical is mental, when the mental is physical, right? To your point, there is a mind-body connection. And if we think about it, the physical demands of competition, training, the injuries that folks experience, all of those things have the capacity to impact how one feels, what they think, how they behave, which is where our mental health kind of manifests and shows up. So the physical demands of being in the world of sport and performance can impact how you feel and think. It can impact your emotions. Similarly, how you feel and think will impact how you show up physically, right? It
Totally.
impacts what you're able to do and it impacts your performance. And so it really is this. Certainly, I know that there are physical and mental aspects of ourselves, but it's really almost a false dividing line to suggest that they are completely separate from one another because the brain controls everything we do. It's a part of the body. So it makes sense that what originates in the brain, thoughts, emotions, the storage of our experiences and memories associated with our experiences, it would make sense that that will impact how we show up, how we move, what we do, how we think about our capacity to move and do things. So I'm with you. I think we would be better served by thinking about health and thinking about the different aspects of health and the different aspects that live within health and even beyond physical and mental. I certainly have come to the point over the last several years of understanding what happens around us, environmental health, social health and wellness, what happens in society. Those things impact us too. And so I've really come to see health and performance really living at the intersection of what's going on within an individual and the environments that they are in, because everything happens in context. And if we don't think about the health of the environments that we're in, I think we're missing a huge piece of what contributes to an individual's capacity to be healthy and to perform well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that can be defined in so many ways: their family, their community, their neighborhood, their team,
cultural identities,
all that, right? So I'm going to get a little bit micro and nitty gritty and maybe a chance for us to geek out a little bit together.
Let's do it.
The mental tool of imagery, when it comes to how we use that, it's my favorite mental tool. And when I train on this mental tool with my athletes, I love to say that it helps develop the mental skill of motivation, confidence, but that when we train, and maybe you and I can break this down a little bit, on an imagery script that's co-created by athlete and mental performance consultant, that the brain processes it through the same neural pathways as physically training on that same act. I love that. It's so awesome. And everybody's like, say that again, what? So what are your thoughts on that particular mental tool?
The mind is such a powerful thing.
It is. It is.
The intricacies and the beautiful way in which it functions, right? Independent of us. It's really just a stunning thing. But I think the point that you just made kind of highlights why mental skills training can be helpful and is helpful. And to be clear, I know we're talking about the world of sport and performance, but this is why it's helpful in any aspect of life. There's the popular saying, if you can see it, you can be it. Well, that speaks to imagery, right? If you can see it in your mind, if you can see yourself being successful, executing on a skill, doing that presentation well, having a great conversation, if you can see it, if you can imagine it, that increases your capacity to believe that it can happen in real life. And to your point about the physiology of it, the way I describe it is when you do imagery, it's just defining those grooves in the brain that allow you to do it in real life. So like you said, it's using the same neural pathways that are used when you actually do that task in real life. And so certainly it doesn't necessarily feel the exact same when you imagine it versus when you do it, but you are still deepening those grooves and deepening that confidence and deepening the neural pathways that are needed in order for you to execute. So I think understanding some of that science really could help people to understand why we use some of the skills that we use and why we encourage some of the strategies that we do. It's not just a matter of, oh no, it's cool. It actually is helpful. And I think one more point, this year's Olympics, there were so many athletes that you saw. I'm going to blank on his name, but it's the pommel horse, the United States pommel horse.
We don't need to know his name. We know him.
Clark Kent is what everybody refers to him as. But that gentleman, I remember seeing an image of him warming up, and he was actually standing on the ground. But you could see him moving in the movements of his routine, not completely, but you could see him going through the routine in his mind and moving his body in such a way that mimicked what he would have to do on the pommel horse. Again, that's the power of visualization.
Yes,
right?
it is.
And when you couple that with breathing, right, as we saw with Simone Biles sitting,
Yep, yep,
right
yep,
before, if
yep.
you couple that with self-talk, as we've seen with Gabby Thomas, right, as we
Mhm.
saw with Suni Lee, right,
Yes,
just saying keywords
yes.
to remind yourself of what you are capable of. The skills, when used independently, are great. When you combine them, they become even more a performance edge and a tool
Yes,
that you can use in elevating
totally.
your performance.
Those are great examples. Great examples. I love grooves in the brain. Dang. I could just almost feel that. Like
Yeah.
that's amazing. I think that's so important for people to hear. And I think when we link the skill in some form, the physical aspect together, when it's
Mhm.
time to execute fully, it's just even that they're that much more confident and ready.
And because it doesn't feel new to them,
Right.
right? I think that's
Yep.
the thing to think about the groove in the brain. If I can attach a word to that, developing that groove helps things to feel more automatic, right? You
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
don't have to think about what you're doing. You trust that groove because you've done it either in real life or in your visualization moments. You have created a groove that allows the activity to feel much more automatic, which contributes to the increased confidence, the increased trust, and the capacity to just perform when you need to rather than think about performing
That's
when
right.
you're in those moments.
That's right. That's right. Wow. Yeah. And I think the vividness of how you can imagine using all senses
Mhm.
together, the brain likes that, right? The brain likes instruction. The
Absolutely.
the brain loves clear instruction. And so I think that's really, really cool. Talk to me about the sort of the psychology of injury. I think that's a big one,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
How we can use mental health clinicians, licensed mental health clinicians, and certified mental performance consultants, depending on the role, the individual person, to prevent injury, to assist in recovery and return to play. How can each of those professions, collaboratively or independent, help the athlete to be as mentally fit as possible through the physical recovery of their body?
It's one of the experiences in sport injury, incurring injury, that I think lends itself to really a comprehensive and holistic approach to
Mm-hmm.
treatment and care. And I say that because for many athletes, there's the mentality not of if I get injured, but when and how
Right.
significant will it be, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
when we think about injury, there's such a range of experiences that fall into that umbrella, whether it's someone who sprains an ankle and they're able to bounce back and play immediately, or someone who it sustains a career ending injury,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Forbid that they would do that, but that's a part of the reality of sport. And so injury certainly is a full body experience. There's the physical impacts of when you get injured. And it's not just the impacts around what may be impacted in terms of what you can do in your sport, but your health and functioning may be impacted, right? Like I've worked with some athletes, they have a leg injury, just let's say, and sure, they can't play football or basketball, but they also can't drive because the injury is on their dominant leg,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or they
Mm-hmm.
can't take a shower in the same way because they can't get their cast wet, right? So when we think about injury, it's not just the impact that happens on their respective field of play, but what happens in your life, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
there's the physical aspect, there's the emotional aspect that goes along with injury. A lot of people will liken the emotional process of walking through an injury to a grief process, right? Like
Yes.
kind of going
Yes.
through the shock of it happening, the anger and frustration around it happening, the trying to bargain, right? With, well, if I
Mm-hmm.
can just do this, right? And then maybe some sadness, disappointment at when the reality of the injury sets in, and maybe acceptance around that, but also then the need to continue to engage in a recovery process. So to have some
Right.
level of motivation, to have some level of hope, to have some capacity to keep moving with the hopes that tomorrow will be different and better than today. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the emotional piece. And then there's the social piece. Because when folks are injured, if they're injured and it takes them away from court, it also usually takes them away from some team activities. It
Right.
takes them away from the role that they may have traditionally played. And so there can be some difficulty with managing the social shift that might happen while they are managing their injury. So when I think about all of that, If we're thinking about the physical impacts, the emotional impacts, the behavioral and social impacts, certainly you need physical healthcare professionals, but you also need somebody who can be there to offer support in the emotional space to normalize some of those feelings that folks may be feeling, to give them a space to process and talk about it, right? If this is a recurring injury, this may be bringing up feelings from the past when they've been injured before. If they've never been injured, this may bring up fear about what's to come. So having someone who understands that, who can explain why some of those emotions and feelings may be what they are, can be really helpful. To your point, we like information. And oftentimes when you think about folks who are experiencing injury on the physical health side, they'll try to provide as much information as they can about the injury, about what's needed to recover, whether it's surgery or a treatment process. They'll do that. And I think we as mental health and mental performance professionals can offer a similar kind of support as it relates to the emotional, the psychological impacts. And then when you think about returning to play, there's healing, certainly. There's the physical preparation and restoration that has to happen, but there's also psychological readiness and helping folks to be psychologically ready to return to activity and then to return to competition. Another way that we can be helpful in the process of managing someone who is experiencing and dealing with it.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you for breaking that all down. So important. What is your perspective on, because this has come up a couple times for me in my work, that the coach's intention to keep the recovering player in the mix of the social environment as much as possible, so there's not isolation, and that they can be a part of it and still kind of interact with their teammates and the situation as much as possible. Sometimes the athletes I work with don't want to be a part of it. Right? It's too painful for them. It's hard. It's like, thanks, but no thanks. I want to be over here. Like, I see benefits of both. And of course, it's depending on the individual sitting in front of you. But what would be your approach in something like that?
It's interesting as you were starting the question of what do I think about a coach who wants to keep somebody involved. The phrase that came in my mind was, I think they're very well intentioned. Right? Like I think they're trying to do what they think can be helpful for that athlete. And I think they're trying to do what they think is helpful for the collective team. To keep that person around and have them involved. But the latter point you made, I think, is really important, is it's so important to include athletes in these conversations. I think a lot of times we talk around athletes, like we have our idea of what's helpful or what they need or what's beneficial. And the reality is, talk to them, they can tell you what they need or what they want, right? And there's sometimes where if an athlete wants to be separate, right? Like if you have a relationship with them, right? And I think that is the word. Establishing a relationship with your athletes kind of allows you to understand and be able to have these very candid conversations. But having a relationship with them will allow you to know if this distance is because that's what they need or if this distance is because they don't know how to handle. But regardless of what it is, you can still offer support to them while involving them in the process of thinking through what this recovery is going to look like, right? And I think that cannot be stated enough, is you can get so much more out of people by just having conversations with them. You can get a lot from athletes by talking to them, asking them the questions, saying, this is what I think. Like, I'm thinking that having you be around and do this will be really, really helpful. And I would love for you to do it. Let's talk about it. Right? Because you also might be able to come to a compromise. It might not have to be either or, but it might can be a both and. You give the athlete some level of autonomy and control, which for an athlete who's managing injury, feeling like there's some area where they have some autonomy, control, and where they can use their voice, can be a powerful healing tool as well. Right? When they feel like this unexpected thing has happened to me that I have no control over, this recovery process that I don't want, I didn't ask for, but I'm going to be given an opportunity to talk about what my recovery might look like, what my integration with the team may look like. The coach is actually still interested in what I think, what I have to say, and hearing my voice. That can be really powerful during a time when things feel very out of control.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Like the piece of the process, no matter what the outcome is, both and hopefully, but is that including them in that?
Is that including them?
What do you think outside of injury or with injury, what do you think the hesitancy is for coaches, maybe, or is it a hesitancy to include the athlete in these conversations, especially around the recovery, the mental recovery, injury, but also mental health in general. Yeah.
I think coaches have a tough job. Let me just
yes,
I think
for sure.
coaches have a really hard job because coaching is not just about teaching the X's and O's, whatever sport you happen to be participating in, but coaching is about offering support. It's about guidance. If you're doing a team sport, it's about bringing a group of people together and trying to have a shared focus, a common goal. And for coaches, right, like you are trying to translate your knowledge and what you want to happen to a group of people who have to actually execute it, and you don't play 1 minute of any game.
Yeah,
right? But your performance is evaluated based off of what other people do. I think the other thing too is coaches are asked to wear so many different hats. Coaches are coaches, they're recruits, they are surrogate parental figures. More and more, they are counselors, they are therapists. Like they are the ones who have so much responsibility. And sometimes I think your question was, what do I think about their hesitancy to talk about mental recovery, their hesitancy to talk about mental health? I think we see more and more coaches talking about it. So I think that's shifting to some degree, right? I think you have more coaches who will speak about them using services to support their development, their health, their wellness. But I also think that sometimes, and this is true for all leaders, whether we're in corporate spaces, sports spaces, or otherwise, I think leaders are sometimes given this message that they're supposed to know.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be able to figure everything out.
Right.
So I think some of the hesitancy that we sometimes may see comes from this unfair expectation that we often place on our leaders to know all, to be all, to do all for everyone. And my goodness, how daunting that is.
Right.
That's not possible.
Right.
Right. So I think the expectation and pressure that coaches may sometimes feel to be everything to everyone, while simultaneously having the recognition and knowledge, but I don't know how to do that. Right? I don't know how to be a therapist to this person, may result in them pausing on having conversations that they may otherwise have. So I think one of the opportunities that we have in this sports psych, mental performance, mental health space is to think about the mental health of coaches.
For sure.
To think about how we are educating and equipping coaches, to think about their wellness, to think about their development, and then to help them think about the work that they do and how we can help them develop more skills to be a better, more effective, more empathic, culturally humble kind of leader. Right? So, but I think we need to offer support to them so they don't feel so overwhelmed, overloaded, and the weight of an unrealistic expectation, which may free them up to have more of these conversations because they have support. Right. So,
for sure. And that they don't have to know. I think sometimes the hesitancy with everything else they have to do, asking the question and, oh no, the answer, I don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then realizing that there's a full support network around for you and your athletes. You don't have to have the answer, but have the conversation.
Right. And
that's
there's
different.
No judgment if you don't know. Right. Like
that's
there's no expectation and no judgment. If you don't know, what you might know is who you need to get them connected to.
That's right.
That is a win. Right. But I think we don't teach coaches that a part of what makes an excellent coach is to know when to refer or who to go to for support.
Yep.
So we got some opportunities there. We got some opportunities there. Definitely.
We do.
But I do, before you go forward, I want to go back. We were talking about visualization.
Yeah.
I know you said that's your favorite skill to teach. And we were talking about how it creates the grooves. I also want to acknowledge there are some people who quite literally cannot create images in their mind, right? So there might be some people who are like, well, I try to imagine things. I try to see it in my mind's eye, and I can't. So I just want to acknowledge for some people, it is very hard to conjure an image in your mind. So one of the things that you can do to supplement that is to watch an image on a screen. So I have athletes whom it may be difficult for them to sit, close their eyes, and imagine themselves doing something, but they have a recording of their performance or recording of their practice. And I will encourage them to watch that.
Yes.
Because watching that image and watching yourself do something can also have some of those similar effects as visualizing it in your mind. So I just wanted to name that. So for the person who says, but I have trouble visualizing, then find some way to record yourself doing it and watch the recording.
I love that. Because the brain, functions differently for everyone and something's more effective than the other. What I like to do, I love your take on it, is sometimes have them just read the script out loud. Read it out loud.
In your
own words. Yep. And you can hear that and the brain can take that in and process that. there's lots of different ways. But I think to your point, just like with the coaches, us knowing the people that we're working with and knowing what really, like, here's an idea. Yeah. Imagery, but like, how do you feel about it? And like, let's do this together and like, let's do a section and like, let's process it first. It's super cool. In your private practice, I'm sure you get a lot of different kinds of athletes, high performers. What do you say to the person or parent who says, I need someone who knows my kid's sport, or I need someone who knows my sport, who either played it or has coached or worked with someone in that sport for them to be an effective sports psychology professional? How do you address that?
So certainly I can understand where someone would feel like having knowledge of the sport will make you better equipped to provide me with information on how to elevate my performance in it. So, right, like I can understand the assumption that the more knowledge you have about my sport, the better you will be for helping me. And so, look, I respect whatever preferences and requests folks come in with. Like, I want to hear it. So certainly if we're in an initial session or an initial consultation and someone's saying, I want that, have you ever done that? I'll say no, but let me tell you what I am trained to do. Right?
Yes.
And I will share how what I'm trained to do kind of exists across all sports. Now, what I will also say though, and this has happened, and I was specifically with fencing, I knew nothing about fencing. When I say nothing, I knew nothing about fencing, but I've had fencers come in, and what I said to them was, straight up, I don't know your sport. However, I know about mental performance and about what it takes to perform in high pressure situations. I know about what it is to try to enhance and improve your level of handling pressure. But what this also gives you an opportunity to do, if you are okay with it, is to educate me about your sport. Right. And for some, that was really a cool opportunity for them because they don't get to talk about what they do and actually explain it from the point of view of being an expert themselves. And so that actually created an opportunity for them to be expert in the room. Right? It was like a shared power kind of situation in the room. And as I started to learn about it and started to use language, it would be interesting. They'd be like, yes, like that's right. So like they in a growing process.
Yeah.
And they are in a growing process. So I can understand where people have that assumption, but I tried to present where I think my skill set rests. And that's not necessarily in the sport specific knowledge. But if they are adamant, then I try to find them someone who may have that. If I can, I'll say, look, I don't know anyone who has participated in this sport. So if you're open to trying to work together, we can. If not, I can still try to look more. But I try to explain how some of the knowledge that I'll be trying to share with them is not sport specific, but also give them an opportunity to teach me.
Yeah, both and. No, I love it. I love the power dynamic, how that can be shared. You're both learning at the same time. That's fantastic.
I was just going to say, I just remember the fencing, they teaching me about epi and saber and foil. And I was like, but now like I have more of a knowledge, and it really was a very cool experience. These were high school students who were able to teach me about their sport. So it was great.
That's so cool. And the fact that you want to know about their sport, like fencing is not, one of those major sports like basketball, football, baseball type of thing. And for them to have a sense of pride about talking about their sport. And now you have, just like any of us have experience now working with a fencer. And so now that helps the community of fencers if they were to come to you again and like, oh yeah, I do know this and that. And like
have some working knowledge.
Yes, you do. You do. It's obvious that you value leadership. You have held lots of different positions, president of the Association for Applied Sports Psychology, president. You're now president-elect of Division 47 of APA, the Society for Sport, Exercise, and Performance Psychology. And then we're both on the advisory boards for, the sport and performance psychology program at Dominican University of California. Why do these programs get the honor and privilege of having you be a part of them? Like, I'm sure lots of people ask you all the time, can you be this? Can you do that? Like, why these organizations for you?
That's super interesting. It's a really interesting question. As you were asking it and saying, it's clear you value leadership, in my mind, I was like, is that how? And I actually don't know if it is. I think what I have come to value is trying to change culture. And I was going to say to have an impact, but I often don't say trying to make an impact. I say I'm trying to leave my imprint. but I am trying to make an impact as well, a positive impact, because, impacts can be destructive. So I'm trying to have a positive impact, and I'm trying to help facilitate and be a part of culture change as much as I can as it relates to how we think about mental health, how we think about mental performance at the intersection of sport, how we think about culture and how culture plays a role in everything we do, and how we think about the intersection of folks' individual cultural identities with the environmental cultures that they live, work, and play in. Like, I think about all of that, but I really think I value, like, giving back and trying to promote change. There was a time in my career, earlier in my career, where I was not really involved in professional organizations at all. I started with some involvement and then kind of became a little bit disheartened because I didn't see people that looked like me.
Yeah.
I didn't see where my presence, my voice was having any real impact. And so I kind of stepped away. And I, can say that I would at times be on the outside looking in, like having criticisms and preconceived notions and probably inaccurate assumptions about what was or was not happening. And so there came a point when I said, all right, Kensa, so you can keep complaining from outside, or you can step in and see what you can do to try to create some change. And so that, I think, is really what I value. I don't necessarily set out to be a leader of this, that, or the other, but I do want to make some impact, and I do want to contribute to positive change, not just in the circles that I am immediately in, but in the field as a whole. And I also recognize the power of representation.
Yeah.
I recognize the power of, I didn't recognize it, I don't think, as fully until I was in my presidential term during ASP. But I've come to recognize how important it is for people to see people who look like them.
Yes.
The power of me being a Black woman, Christian from the South, who is a psychologist, who is also a certified mental performance consultant, and being able to show up in those identities and having other people see that. It's not representation matters, but beyond mattering, representation is transformative. And it can transform what people think is possible for themselves.
That's right.
It can transform their idea about what spaces they can be in and what roles they can occupy. And so I think that's something that I have come to value and appreciate a great deal, in addition to trying to change culture. One of the ways to do that is by being in leadership positions, and I don't take that lightly at all. I certainly am humbled and honored that colleagues and peers think enough of me to elect me for these positions. Again, that's not just that I signed up. Like, people had to say, yes,
that's right,
that you can lead.
Exactly.
So I certainly don't take that lightly. But the reason I have said yes to the opportunities that you named is because I think they allow a space to try to make some real change.
I appreciate that so much. So inspiring. I know that our annual ASP conference is coming up at the end of this month. Super excited for it. And I think every year I attend, there's more and more brown and Black people in the space. And it's so fantastic. And I know that you have a huge part of that, being in leadership position, being the president, having the, Black and brown cohorts there, and like a special time for Black professionals and students to meet at this conference, to be around each other, to inspire one another, to learn from one another is so, so fantastic. I actually have a colleague who's been a psychologist for a long time and a CMPC. And she's like, are you going to the ASP conference this year? I'm like, yeah, I'm going. She's in California too. Yeah. And she's like, I haven't been involved since I was a student, but I see that it's changing. I see, and she's Filipino American identified. She's like, I see that it's changing. I think I might go. I was like, yeah, go. You'll see. Come see. Yeah. So
come be a part of the change, right?
That's right.
And I respect that, right? Like, I respect that there are people who have been a part of organizations, who have looked at organizations from afar and was like, I'm not sure if that's for me. Like, I just I don't see where there's space for me. So it really just sounds cheesy, but it really, like, I got chills a little bit when you were like, she said she sees that it's changing. Because that means that something that we are collectively doing, whether it's through your podcast, through different leadership roles that folks occupy, looking at the current board of ASP and other professional organizations, right, that suggest, nope, there's room for you and just come.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what's your favorite part about coming to these conferences and seeing everyone?
The people.
The
Period.
people.
Full stop.
Yep.
Like it is,
Yep.
That's what keeps me
Yep.
coming back.
Yeah.
I could go and probably not attend one session. And if I had the opportunity to connect with people, be it students, peers, mentors, people who were my supervisors, like it's the people, right? Because I don't care what organization you're talking about. Organizations are people.
That's right.
And it really is the people that keep me coming back and that keep me motivated and that provide that boost, that sense of recharge every year. It's the people.
For sure. Same. I'm so excited. I can't complete this interview without noting that it is September. It is National Suicide Prevention Month. And, as fellow clinicians and fellow CMPCs, what do you want to make sure people know about or want to be aware about prevention this month from someone who's struggling, but also someone who's close to someone who's struggling? Because I find that people want to know more about that. I have a sibling or a teammate or a parent, even, or a friend who's struggling to the point of having thoughts of suicide or ideas of suicide or even attempting. What would you say to the person individually who's struggling, but also the person who has a loved one who is struggling?
It's a heavy question.
Yeah.
It's a heavy question because what came to mind as you were talking was what I want people to understand is that when you talk about mental health, when you talk about suicide, you're not talking about signs or symptoms or possible action. You're talking about people who are trying to live their lives.
Yeah.
Whenever you talk about mental health, whenever you talk about suicide, you're talking about people. And as you were saying, like, what would you say to someone who is having thoughts around suicide? And quite honestly, the first thing that came to my mind is I would listen. I don't know if I would start with a lot of words. And I think I would just try to listen and through my presence, let them know I'm here in this space, in this moment with you. Because I know I can't walk your path for you. I know I don't feel exactly what you feel. I know I can't do that. So to say that is ridiculous, right?
Yep.
So I'm not going to say all that. But
Right.
what I can do is I can show up and I can listen and I can share my humanity with you. And I think we underestimate what it is to actually just be human with another person, to say, I don't know the answers and I don't know how any of this, the challenges that you are managing, I don't know how it's all going to work out, but I'm here. And if I have access and information about resources, and here are some resources that I think could be helpful, and maybe I'm willing to call with you or go with you, right? So then the first thing I do is just try to listen and I just try to share my humanity and let them know that there are resources, support, and help available and try to help get them connected to the loved one and the family member who is watching a loved one just try to navigate pain.
Yeah.
That's also what I think about when I think about those experiencing suicidal thoughts. It's just pain. Is there's nothing to fix because no one is broken. Right? But again, there is power in sharing humanity and just being there and trying to help someone through their next step and then their next step and then their next step. I think that can be so powerful, but also it's important to know about resources that are available, whether it's 988, whether it is the local mental health resources in your area. A lot of resources have mobile crisis units who will deploy and go out to do welfare checks on someone or wellness checks on someone, whether it's understanding about the crisis text line, whether it's understanding about a host of lines. There are support lines available for new mothers. There are support lines available for Indigenous communities, for those who identify as LGBTQ+. There are lines and support that's available to hopefully reach you where you are as a person and to reach you in your moment of need. So I would try to encourage loved ones to know about the resources that are available. I try to share the resources with somebody who's in a moment of need. But the first things I try to do is listen, share humanity, and try to honor the humanity of the person that's in challenge and in struggle.
I love it. I love it. It is a heavy topic. And for us to be together and discuss it and share humanity between the two of us as we deal with these human experiences of people. I love what you said. There's nothing to fix because nothing is broken. That's huge because I think there's such a desperation with the family members or loved ones to save them, you know?
Sometimes the way to save is like just to be with someone in their moment, right? And that can be hard.
It's so
right? And I
hard,
think that's important too is, we have to kind of be honest about ourselves about what I can sit with, right? I had a friend earlier today, like I called to check on them to see how they were doing. And as soon as they picked up the phone and I heard that familiar, friendly voice, I was like, blah. And like I spilled all these stressors that I feel like are currently invading my world. And then I was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't even ask if you had capacity to hold that. Or I didn't even I asked you how you were doing and you answered quickly. And then, so I think sometimes it's also recognizing for the loved ones, like where we are, what capacity we do have to hold things, but also again being aware of resources that are around us that allow us to offer support. And some of that prevention a lot of that prevention comes before the moment of crisis. Because you asked about that too. What do we need to know about prevention?
That's right.
Prevention it can be about making sure if someone has a diagnosable condition that they have proper treatment and access to treatment and care and meds. But prevention can also be making sure people have access to a community of support.
Yeah.
It can be making sure people have access to food, shelter. Like it can be make sure people have access to some of the basics for living. That can also be prevention. In addition to knowing specific mental health resources.
Which we will put in our show notes for everyone to refer to. They're so important. One thing about 988 that you mentioned, Kensa, is I want people to know that that's more of a warm line. Like you don't need to wait for a crisis to access 988. My young athletes are the ones who chat and text and probably won't call, but it's totally anonymous, confidential, and you can reach out, call, text, or chat at 24/7. Do not wait. Do not wait. And that's good for the family members and loved ones to also have to share and give to those folks. Gosh, this has been amazing. Again, we're going to have to do it again in 2 more years. So we got 2022, 24, and then now 26. We look forward to that one.
Say, as you're saying that, like another thing that just came to mind for me is like, I know we always hear check on your friends, like check on your strong friend. And I would say,
check on your strong
everybody.
Friends. Yeah, right.
Everybody.
Right.
Check on people. And even beyond checking on people, because it doesn't just have to be, well, how are you? Just think about how you're pouring into people.
That's right.
Sometimes you don't have to check, just pour in. Just, hey, I hope you're all right. Hope you're having a good day. Like I don't have to ask you one single question.
That's right.
To let you know that you're on my mind and try to pour into you. And so maybe between now and the next time we do this in 2026, we'll be talking about all the ways that people are trying to pour into each other and all the ways in which wellness just has become a part of our landscape and a part of our cultural.
For sure. So if anybody wants to pour into me, I like emojis and I like
yes.
videos. You don't have to say anything. Just give me an image.
That connection can mean a great deal to someone.
For sure. And those athletes out there, that your sport can be a safe place too. Like my daughter who's been overwhelmed for the last couple of weeks. I was like, babe, you don't have to go to practice this Wednesday if you don't want to. It's okay. She's like, I'm going to think about that, but I need it to stay sane with my schoolwork. I was like, thank you for saying that. Like, here I am not asking her what she would need and thinking that like not being in your sport is going to help you feel better when it's a missing piece for her to cope with the day and the week. And so I was like, forgive me for assuming that's what you need. Thank you for telling me what you do need. And I think that's just another example of the humility we have to take as those people who take care of others in whatever capacity that is to listen and ask.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And kudos to her for being able to say, well, I actually need that. Right. And then she might be able to tell you, but this would be really helpful. Right. And that's a powerful thing for a person to feel like they have room to say what it is they need, what would be helpful, what would feel like support to them. Like that is incredibly empowering. And I think that's prevention. That's wellness, mental health as well. Just giving people space and people feeling like they have the space to say what they need.
For sure. Kensa, I'm looking forward to seeing you at ASP, hanging out.
Seeing you too in person, a big hug, on site.
Yes.
A big hug, definitely.
I can't wait. Yeah. I just can't appreciate you enough and thank you enough for spending time with me again. And I look forward to many more times, and just thank you for, all you do, but most importantly, who you are and how you show up and how you represent and how you inspire people when you don't even realize it. And just thank you.
Well, I thank you for the kindness of those words and sentiments. I do not take them lightly or for granted. And thank you for this platform and for inviting me back to it. Really do appreciate it.
This podcast exists because of the team at CASCM. CASCM is a B2B content production company helping organizations create and share their stories. We aim to create space where businesses can build assets and drive revenue through writing and talking. Content creation should be enjoyable and accessible. At CASCM, we love helping make that happen. Learn more at cascm.com.